You're listening to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. This episode is free to access. This podcast is here for women who are in the middle of life, who are holding a lot and running on empty. They're ready for something to shift, but they don't know where to start. If that's you, start with my free 5-minute What's Next for Me check-in. It'll help you pinpoint what's keeping you stuck and what to focus on first. You'll find it in the show notes. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. Today's episode is a revisit around the topic of rest. We're not going to just repeat everything I've said before on rest. We're going to look at some different types of rest today. We're going to think about why rest is so difficult, why it actually feels uncomfortable sometimes, and the different ways we can rest. This is a topic that has plagued me most of my adult life. A few years ago, I decided to read anything I could find on the topic of sabbathing and sabbatical and that idea, and try and help me understand what does it look like to do rest in a helpful way in a modern, busy life with a personality that likes to do a lot of stuff. And I'm taking a few thoughts today, especially around this idea of types of rest. So if you've listened to me talk about rest before, hopefully this will feel a little bit different. So real quick, the first thing I want to talk about is why does rest feel so difficult for so many of us? It's not everybody, and there are people out there that are really good at rhythms of resting. And quite frankly, I'm quite jealous of those people. I think there is something that we feel, which is both a relaxation guilt and a time anxiety. So relaxation guilt comes from the fact there is a feeling that there is something else I should be doing rather than resting. I have a bit of a personality that, let's say it's a Saturday morning and I come down and the kitchen's a bit of a mess and I want to do something restful. I can't rest until I've done that thing first. I can't ignore the fact there is washing in the machine or washing on the table or washing that needs to be done or a dishwasher that needs to be empty. I kind of want to do those things and then I want to sit and read or think or whatever it is I want to do. I find it difficult to put the rest first. And I think that is because there is something ingrained in me that, one, likes to see a sense of order for me to feel rested. But I also think that I have a problem with seeing that rest is a reward for work. And I wonder whether you're listening to this and you are stuck in that trap. Or you just have literally too much to do. And so it feels like, well, if I rest, I'm not going to get everything done that I wanted to. We're in this optimization culture that I've been talking about on the podcast. Everything needs to be optimized and rest doesn't feel very optimal. Every moment should be useful or should have an outcome or should have a milestone or should be tracked or should be productive in some way. We're also constantly connected to emails and text and messages. We are always on. There is always a way of getting hold of us. And as I've said before, many people who listen to this podcast are mothers, and those of us who are parents of teenagers. I feel for both my teenagers and my elderly dad that I do need to be available for them at all times. So there's always a sense of, well, I'm never going to just put my phone in a drawer for a whole day and ignore it because I may need to be contacted and I want to be available. So there is that slight anxiety around that. And then there is also the feeling that if I'm resting, I'm wasting time, I'm being lazy, I'm falling behind, I should be doing something productive. I find myself often doing something at the same time as a restful activity to make myself feel like I'm optimizing the time. And I don't like this about myself. I'll probably talk about this a bit more in my Life Lately episode. But I know that there's something around optimization or being busy that is difficult to then switch to rest. And what I want to talk about a little bit here, which is why rest can actually feel uncomfortable when we are in a particularly busy time. I just want to point to this book. I've mentioned it before. It's called Burnout, Solve Your Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, who are sisters. There is some really good stuff in here. More than anything, there was just the best explanation I've ever come across around what happens when we are in the stress response. What's going on in our bodies and why we find it so difficult with the stress response. And if you don't even read past the first couple of chapters, there is such a lot of good stuff in that early part, which I would highly recommend. So, Physiotherapist and nervous system educator Sarah Ollis explains that we often feel anxious when we finally stop because of what's going on with our autonomic nervous system. I'm not going to just say loads of big words to you, so just bear with for a second. The sympathetic nervous system drives our fight or flight response, okay? And the parasympathetic nervous system supports rest, digestion, and repair. As you'll read about in the Burnout book, modern life means that the stress response, which is the sympathetic nervous system, is constantly being activated, constantly, through deadlines, notifications, the news, emails, noise, multitasking, connectivity, the barrage of information and noise and competing tasks means that the way modern life is that we are in a situation where our stress response is constantly being activated and it's not being closed off properly, which is what this book talks about. So being switched on becomes what's normal for our brain, i.e. it doesn't know how to feel not switched on. It's got so used to being in that setting, which I know is going on in my life at the moment, that feels normal, okay? And what's explained by Sarah Ollis is then when your brain begins to associate being switched on with control and safety, because this is normal, when you try to rest, it feels unsafe. So if you've ever felt some uncomfortability by slowing down, switching off, getting rid of the noise, doing things slowly, stepping away, and it feels uncomfortable in your body, in your brain, that is because that switch has got switched on and it's got stuck in position. And I'm not going to lie, I'm in that position right now. I am absolutely there. I wake up in the morning, and from the minute I wake up into the minute I go to bed, I am soothing my brain through staying in this switched on state. So please hear me when I say this. I am learning about this for my own sake and my own sanity as much as I am you. Now, do we feel we're getting enough rest? The largest survey on rest that was done by Durham University found that 68% of us would like more rest. 10% of people think they need less rest than they're getting. Oh, lucky them. But 32% of us believe they need more rest than the average person. I don't think I need more rest than the average person. I think I need more rest than I'm getting. 53% of people feel they never get enough rest, never. And the average person gets about 3 hours, 13 minutes of rest per week outside of sleep. I'm not sure what's being classed as rest. So I don't know in that first survey what is being classed as rest. So on top of rest as a concept, what do you think of? You know, when I say, are you getting enough rest, do you automatically think sleep? I don't think I'm getting enough sleep, but this concept of rest that comes from Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith is that actually rest is a lot more than sleep. And again, this book Burnout would say so too. There are certain types of rest that we can have that all have a purpose for us. So I'm going to talk through these different types of rest real quick. And so you can maybe even gauge, I'm going to create a resource around this, by the way, but so you can gauge what type of rest you feel you're lacking and whether there are things that you are doing well and parts of this that you would give yourself a 0 out of 10. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 types of rest. Physical rest, the purpose of that is to restore the body. And physical rest might look like sleep, naps, stretching, and walking. Okay, that's a physical type of rest. For some people, you could argue that might include stronger physical activity than walking, but we're trying to focus on restful, replenishing activities and not just exercise, which has its own purpose completely. Mental rest, the purpose of that is to calm an overworked mind, that always on mind. And mental rest looks like breaks, mindfulness, prayer. You could even put yoga into that across the mental and physical, and reduced multitasking, not allowing yourself to do 2 things at once. Emotional rest, the purpose of that is to process your feelings. That could be honest conversations with trusted people, therapy, and journaling. That's an emotional type of rest. Social rest, is the purpose of that is to recover through healthy relationships, restorative people that fill your cup. And essentially that is about having time with those good people in your life, whether that's family or friends, but people who you know being with them is a restful activity. It's just easy. It doesn't ask of you. I've got a couple of friends that I walk the dog with and they are social rest for me. It's easy peasy. Sensory rest, that's about reducing stimulation. So maybe having a day where you have more quiet, where you limit screens of any kind, or you limit news, or you limit social media, or you limit music even. Sensory rest, reducing the stimulation. Creative rest. The purpose of this is to inspire us and to refresh our imagination. How many of us are not doing enough of this, and therefore we're getting a bit stagnant with our thinking and our creativity? And examples could be music, singing, looking at art, doing art, getting out in nature, creative activities, being with creation or being in a creative activity. Photography, there's lots of sewing, knitting, there's a million things that are creative, baking. And then spiritual rest is about connecting with that sense of meaning and purpose. That's the purpose of it. And for that could be, again, it comes across that physical and mental I mentioned before. That could look like prayer. That could look like community. That could look like meditation. These are all types of rest. So being exhausted is not always the answer is you need more sleep. In the same way, when a baby is upset, the answer is not always they need more milk. An adult human, the answer from exhaustion is not you need more sleep. It could be you need more purposeful work. It could be that you need more creative rest or sensory reduced stimulation, or you need some time to process your feelings. And this list I'm going to make available to you for you to have a reflection over and think, what does this look like for me? Okay. So during the rest test, which was done by Durham University, thousands of people were asked about what's restful. And the top most restful activity is reading. I think it is a really soothing thing to do. It is a single item thing to do. You cannot read and do something else. I also like listening to books. I don't know whether that is as restful as sitting with a book, but it is a restful thing to do for me. I feel like it calms me, especially if it's a book I know well and I know what's going to happen. My son has listened to Harry Potter so many times, and I know for him, my 17-year-old son, just to be clear, he's not little, I know for him that the repetition has a level of comfort about it. And I do the same with, this is going to make me sound really, I do the same with Jane Austen, but I do. Jane Austen's books act similarly for me, as they're a comfort for me because I know what happens. Being in nature came in at position number 2, very restful. There is a study that was done that even looking at nature as your laptop screensaver or watching a YouTube nature video for a few minutes at lunchtime, if you cannot get outside, is good for your brain. That's how powerful nature is. So do that. If you can't do anything else, do that. Number 3, being alone, was the third most restful. And these 3 things were so close in their order. Number 4 was listening to music. And number 5 was doing nothing in particular. There's something here about none of these things have an output, apart from maybe reading, where you can complete a book. But the idea is there's something about them that is a resetting. You're not trying to strive for anything. They are often solitary activities. In fact, they pretty much are. Those activities are solitary. And I think there is a need for us to learn to be comfortable alone. And in a modern age where we are constantly connected, we desperately need community and we need meaningful community. But being comfortable with solitude is so, so important. Perhaps it's not the total hours resting or working that we need, but what are our rhythms of work, rest and time with and without others? How do we think about work? How do we think about rest? How do we think time alone? And how do we think about time with others? We obviously have to think about our personality in here. And even if you have a very extroverted personality, I would argue that as much as you need social connection, you need time alone. And if you are a very introverted character, you will lean towards reading and solitary activities and so on. I would argue that you need social connection. But there will be things that feel more akin to who we are. So we don't need to copy what other people do. We need to find a routine that works for us. We've got to work out what kind of fatigue are we experiencing, and then look at that list of rest types and think what type of rest will address the type of fatigue that I'm facing. I'm going to give you a couple of questions that you can reflect on, and then I'm going to talk to you about personality type a bit more. When was the last time you felt genuinely rested? Do you ever feel guilty when you're resting? What type of rest do you think you're currently missing? Which of the top 5 restful activities resonates most with you? Has rest become something that you schedule and complete, or something that only happens when everything else is finished? What would change if we viewed rest as a necessity rather than a reward? Okay, so finally, those of you that have read my book, The Purpose Pursuit by Hannah Miller, available in all bookstores, coming out in paperback, FYI, later this year. I talk about some personality types. I've created some simple personality types, and I'm going to do a resource. We're going to create a resource for you on this where you can dig into this in much more detail. But I want to just give you a couple of thoughts here around what might happen for each of these types of personality, just to finish us off, okay? So type A is the achiever. If the achiever has got overtired, they're going to have mental overload, physical tension, productivity guilt, and constant striving. Some rest and some R&R ideas for these people are to walk without tracking, stretch or do yoga, have a tech-free afternoon, read for pleasure, do nothing with no goal, and take up a slow hobby, something that takes time, like gardening or baking. Type B. If you are overtired and overstretched, you might find that you move into analysis paralysis, information overload, and decision fatigue. So maybe some R&R ideas for you are to spend some time in nature, listen to music, to sketch or create without any real purpose, do some mindfulness, puzzles for fun, reduce notifications, and do some quiet reading. Type C is the connector. Connectors love to be with people, but overload and fatigue might look like emotional labour, compassion fatigue, giving too much to too many people. R&R might look like time with people who recharge you rather than the people who need you. Honest conversations, doing some volunteering that feels meaningful and not obligatory. Meditation and setting healthy boundaries. Type D, constant performance, leadership pressure and social overstimulation is what comes from being always on and overtired. This feeling of I've got to always perform. I've got to keep, giving in social settings. What they may need to do is solo walks, to do exercise for enjoyment rather than competition, music, hobbies where no one's watching, time offline, and being in nature. Type E is the believer. This is the person who, what they do really has to have meaning. And if they're in overload, they're going to be carrying too much responsibility. They're going to have purpose fatigue and think, what on earth is the point of this? And they're always putting other people's needs first. So what they may need to do is some reflection, prayer or meditation, reading inspiring books, get back to a gratitude practice, finding some meaningful community, quiet retreats, and getting back to journaling around their values rather than the tasks that are expected of them. Finally, if you're an explorer, overload and overstimulation and being stuck in the stress cycle might look like too many experiences, too much novelty, scattered attention. You've just got stuck in this slightly sort of chaotic space of adventure and overstimulating yourself. So what you might need to think about is slow travel, mindful walks, creative play, reading fiction, digital detox, restorative movement, and choosing one activity at a time. Now, none of these things are bad. Like, all those ideas are great, whatever type of personality, but it is helpful to see, I think, that rest looks different for each of us. Rest for me is going to look so different to rest for a deeply contemplative personality. It is never going to be like them. But I can learn how to rest better by learning from other personalities and learning some of the things that they do. And I think maybe a task for us is to think, what can we add into the next week, which is a restful activity that meets one of those types of rest definitions and is rest for rest's sake, that we prioritise even when there are still jobs to do. I hope this doesn't feel like another stick to beat yourself with, but instead is a challenge to think, how do I demonstrate rest in my life? And I think if nothing else, I'm quite challenged that I'm demonstrating to my kids that I'm just an always on person, when I want them to see that I also prioritize my own rest and model that to them effectively. So maybe that will act as a motivation for you. There's going to be a resource available to you. Have a look in the show notes. It'll also be attached to my blog. You can find out more about my blog by heading to my website, hellosidekick.co, or go to Substack and look for Hello Hannah Miller. Bye for now.